folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. This might be a fairly short one, but I interacted with a few posts, a few things on YouTube that I thought sort of inspired me to do a little short one here. It's mostly repetition, but since I haven't really talked about this in a while, I think it's an important thing to cover. I'm going to call this talk, What Was God Thinking? The Time Before Time. Now, one of the things that troubles people, I think a lot, is what is God? And, you ask 1,000 people and they'll give you 1,000 different answers to that question. With slight variations. Well, I think that is one good clue that says we are not all one, we are not all God, so that disproves a fair amount of the stories you'll get when you ask folks that question. Then you come across another group of folks that says, well, God is my God, and point to their scripture or their favorite translation of the Bible or whatever, and say, see, this is the gospel, must be true. And you'll run up against a brick wall trying to say, well, how do you know it's true? And that's when they usually start calling you names and either block you or try to make your life impossible by stalking you. Okay, so what was God thinking? I think to understand God, you have to get into God's mind and think about creation. Think about how everything started. Okay, so how does creation work? Well, look at the picture in the background. This is an M.C. Escher print. And it's kind of indicative of one of the paradoxes of creation. You've got, does the artist draw the picture, or the picture draw the artist? And this kind of gets at another of the fundamental questions of creation. Now, a lot of people think that matter creates thought. Except we know that our thoughts create matter, because it is a thought that created everything that any human ever invented. In fact, we've invented things that are immaterial, ideas. Those are creations too. Now, tell me, why would creation work one way in our human observation and it work any other way for God? So this is kind of the way that you can come to thinking properly that thought creates matter. And that is consistent with what scientists have observed of the reality of matter. That, if you really study physics at a very small level, quantum physics, you will discover that matter is not solid. It may look solid, it may feel solid, but in fact, it's 99.99 something percent nothing. In fact, if you observe matter in its as close as you can, which is the high energy, small distance framework, matter behaves like a wave, behaves like energy. And matter and energy are actually interchangeable. This is E equals mc squared. As you probably heard if you ever had a physics class, or you ever saw a meme about Albert Einstein. Okay, so let's take it for a given that thought creates matter. That the Big Bang is, at least according to what physicists have observed, the theory that they've got, there was a beginning to our universe. Now, there's a lot of discussion going on right now around, well, are we in the only universe? If there are other universes, how many are there? How do they work? How do they happen? And one of the things that leads to that is there's a growing body of evidence. We've always had evidence since we started studying elementary particles that, gee, it's weird. Our universe only has mostly one kind of matter. Positive matter, we call it. And then we can observe, we can create antimatter, but we know that matter and antimatter collide and they annihilate each other. And all that's left is some energy, a great amount of energy that comes from matter and antimatter annihilating. So in fact, the only place we can observe antimatter, at least as far as we've seen in the physics world, is in the collisions of very high energy cosmic rays that come from outer space, and in the collisions that we can create by accelerating particles to great speeds inside labs like Fermilab and CERN. Okay, well, that's interesting. Where did all the antimatter go? And the obvious simple solution is that, well, the Big Bang probably was part of a duoverse. And at the same time the universe was created, there was an anti-universe of antimatter. Maybe a mirror universe, maybe a parallel universe that was like the original, but had one set of very fundamental differences in how it began. Okay, so let's move from that. Let's assume that idea of the universe-anti-universe pair was the beginning of an idea, the implementation of an idea. Now, who had that idea and why? Well, another thing you will learn from quantum mechanics, the science of small things, is that the observer can affect the experiment. The double slit experiment, in fact, is one where if you set it up one way, you see two groups of particles hitting a wall in front of a slit. If you set it up another way, you see a waveform distribution between the two slits. And, this is one of the great mysteries of quantum mechanics, that particles can behave like matter or like energy, depending on how you observe them. And in fact, it would seem that they don't determine their exact state until you look at them. It's like, like a strip model on the internet waiting for their first customer to come and observe their channel. They could change clothes a dozen times, but until somebody actually comes and views their channel, nobody knows what they're going to have on, what they're going to be doing. Okay, so now that we've got that past us, let's back up a little bit. Now, okay, so let's assume then that the truth is that God is not part of the experiment, or at least wasn't to begin with. Why? Well, if you were experimenting, if you were a scientist, you'd want to observe from the outside. First, to see what's happening, what behavior you could determine from outside. You'd learn as much as possible from the outside, And if you didn't learn everything you want, eventually you might want to go observe it from the inside. This is a scientific view of God. Now, the other things that God was thinking in the time before time, why create it all? Why do people create? They have ideas, they have inspirations. They want to impress others with their ideas and inspirations, make a name for themselves. Why do we want to do that? Well, most fundamentally, the first people that we want to impress are our parents. Because when we're born, those are the only people we know. And, that's our universe at the time. And this is the other dimension of getting into the mind of God. You've got to think of God as both a scientist and an experimenter that started out not even knowing he was experimenting. Started out just wanting to have a family. And then started realizing, well, okay, how can I have a family? What would it be like to have another? Because being all alone by yourself, even if you're the one... Sorry, I gotta dismiss this call here. Let me just tell my wife I'm occupied. Okay, so one is a lonely number. You know that old Three Dogs Night song? One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. Don't get me for a copyright strike on that one. I only quoted a short phrase that I'm sure has been invented before that song was published. And mentioning a song I don't think is a copyright strike, or quoting a single line. Yeah, it's lonely to be one. Even if you're the perfect one, the all one. You want something else. You want a playmate. You want somebody to bounce ideas off of. Because if you're a creature of thought, which is what souls are, thought is meaningless unless you can do something with it. Pure thought by itself is so much mental masturbation, right? And that's why we have so much of the self-help stuff say we've got to get out of our mind. You've got to start thinking in circles. Okay, well, that doesn't mean emptying your mind and not thinking at all, which is what a lot of people are trying to propose. Oh, let Jesus decide for me. Let the source draw me to the conclusion. Let Numby-Gumby spiritual guru Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts or the Dalai Lama tell me what to do, please. Okay, if that's your bent, that wasn't how creation started. That wasn't how God thought. Now that doesn't make those modes of thought wrong. It just means they're not very creative, or they let other people drive your thoughts. And if you let other people drive your thoughts, you are not creating your own reality. You're creating someone else's reality. And that's okay. That's what teamwork is for. That's what we do when we design a new iPhone, or a new Android phone, or a new printer, which is something I've done or been a part of, the team that designed. Or the machine that tests the latest microchips. That's another thing I've done in my past. I've done a lot of things, even in only one incarnation. So I know a lot of this shit. Um, so yeah, there's two sides to understanding God, and one is as a scientist, as an experimenter, and the other as a parent. And anybody who's ever had children knows that a parent, the parenting experience is an experiment. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to want to start over, which is why parents usually kind of get in the mood to have another child and do it right this time. Only they discover that the second child has a whole different set of challenges for them, that they aren't, in fact, created equal. In fact, if you raise both children the exact same way, they will turn out different because why? They're not carbon copies. They're not clones. Now, you can make clone children. That's how we design computers. They're essentially clones of our ideas. We program them to think and act exactly the way we want them. And that is where we were at before we started trying to experiment with artificial intelligence. Why? Because programs are kind of boring. And we have to keep programming them. Wouldn't it be nice if they could program themselves? And that kind of explains the thought process behind all of creation. Assuming, if you will, now I don't know this for sure, that God could create and destroy at will. I think we've seen people destroy things, so it certainly is within the realm of possibility. God may have made some mistakes and destroyed them and started over. Why didn't he this time? Why are we still proceeding with creation? In fact, physicists looking at the universe, the observable universe, are saying, gosh, it looks an awful lot like it's not slowing down, it's accelerating. And they're troubled by this because they originally thought, well, the Big Bang was this big explosion and then it's going to collapse and then we're going to have another Big Bang, and it's cyclical because that's what the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition said. It was creation is cyclical, and there's a lot of folks that still want it to be that way. I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed. Creation is expanding, not only in this universe, but the multiverse, many universes. Another piece of the puzzle that will help you understand who the real God is, why there are so many false gods. Okay, because basically each universe is the embodiment of the ideal of a different God. Not God with a capital G, the little g gods and goddesses, and God things that have no sex, God ideas that have no embodiment. Anything can be a god. Ideas can be gods. And that's why humanity had to exist. Because when all you had was pure thought, thoughts were energy. Thoughts were pure emotion. They were easy to get confused. They weren't very expressive. They had strong emotions, but they didn't have a lot of color. You could be angry, but, nobody knew why you were angry or who you were angry at. And souls started making assumptions. Big sister's angry at me because I thought of blah, 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 blah. And I thought of it first. I know I thought of it first. Daddy told me I was first. And they get into arguments. And yes, the first souls were like little children. God was like a little child when he first started thinking. Why would that pattern change? Why would one soul be any different than another? If you got something that works, you don't muck with it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, now, we all know that the world didn't happen in 7 days. Creation was not finished in 6 days, and God rested on the 7th. That's absurd. Does this look like nothing's broke? And, this is what turns so many people into atheists. They say, well, you can't possibly believe that shit. And this is essentially what I call the way cult Marxism works. You don't like the prevailing truth, so you just throw the whole thing out and you invent your own truth. We've been doing that for a long time as a species, and it's time to stop doing it. Why have we been doing it? Because the truth was kind of hidden. Why was it hidden? Well, anybody who's a social scientist knows that if you are doing a social engineering experiment, if the subjects of the experiment know what's going on, they can change the results. If you've heard of the term confirmation bias, even the people who designed the experiment can change the results because they happen to want it to come out one way or another. So eventually you've got to have everybody playing the game before it becomes fair. At least everybody that hasn't agreed to just be an observer, to have no contact with that game. And, well, how do you set up such an experiment and not force everybody to play it? Force everybody to play the game, which would be kind of dark, nasty. No one wants a dark, nasty God. That kind of a father probably would be turned on by his family and knocked off eventually. And there's a lot of souls that still think that they can knock off the first soul. That's basically what the war in heaven was all about. And creation is the solution. To stop the war in heaven, we've got to have language, ideas, a very expressive language with very deep ideas. Ideas so deep that we can test those ideas against different theories. See which ones hold up, which ones don't, which ones are consistent with previous ideas, which ones aren't. This is how physical universes get created. They are bounded by the laws of chemistry and physics. Who made those laws? They were made not just pulling a number out of a hat for the speed of light, Planck's constant, whatever, all of these things that physicists take for granted. No, they were experimented with. Some versions worked, some versions didn't. And the versions that turned out to work the best at making the game better, giving souls a fair chance to be a creator, giving them a fair chance of not encountering too much pain or suffering that wasn't of their own challenge. And yes, there are people who will challenge themselves knowing that it's going to be painful. What does any prize athlete do? They push themselves to the limit because they want to get to competition, get to the Olympics, and they want to be the best. And they know if they're going to do that, they've got to get to their best before they ever get to the Olympics. They do training and they push themselves and they sometimes hurt themselves. Some of the best athletes ever knocked themselves out before they ever got to the Olympics. before they ever got to their first competition. That's a risk you take. But there's a good saying that goes, no pain, no gain. If you don't challenge yourself, you're not going to accomplish anything. And this ties in with another subject that I talk a lot about, spiritual bypassing. There are many people who want to tell you, oh, just do this and your life's going to be perfect. You just have to change your diet to this, and you just have to think like this, and you just have to do this, and you just have to do that, and then you'll be like me, enlightened. Oh, I'm such a wonderful person. Look, I'm so successful. I have a big following. Oh, I must be doing everything right. This is spiritual bypassing. It may work for them for a while, if it works for enough people that the people keep following them, or they can keep following finding a steady stream of gullible folks to swallow their advertising. Now, this is how false gods work too. Okay, the universes that kind of go their own way, that don't obey the laws, and karma is a law as well. Those who don't obey karma, don't obey the laws of physics and chemistry, yes, there are gods like that. And they can be like, I don't know. I grew up with Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner cartoons. And if you ever watch those cartoons, you know that anything could happen. And usually did. It was really funny to see Coyote cook up this crazy scheme to finally kill the Roadrunner so he could eat it, and then it always ends up backfiring on the Coyote. This is kind of how dark gods and goddesses work. They get there through their sins, and it forms an energy, a spiritual energy, which is what the Merkaba is. This is the real you is your Merkaba. That's what exists and goes around with your soul wherever it goes. And it can be part of a larger Merkaba of an oversoul, and you're just a piece of a larger puzzle. But you're an independent piece, and you're not stuck there. You're not all one. And yes, you can escape the matrix. It takes effort. And the difficult thing is you can escape one matrix and fall into another. If you know anything about physics, you know that you can excite an electron to escape from an atom. And it's a free electron. But it's liable to run into another atom and get captured in a different atom that wanted to have an electron and was attracting it there. It escaped from one matrix into another. And the other one may be a less happy matrix. Maybe it gets captured in a spot where there's a higher binding energy. It's more difficult to escape from. You need a higher escape velocity to get out of the orbit of that dark god. And that's exactly how things work in the multiverse. And it's supposed to work that way, because you're not going to grow up, you're not going to learn anything as a soul unless you're challenged. We can't just pour all the knowledge of the multiverse into your heads. I know I'm trying to, and maybe some of it will stick. We still try because we care about you. Any soul that is at all advanced starts caring more about other souls. You start by caring for your own family. Caring for yourself even is a step in the right direction, right? There's many people out there that don't even care about themselves. And that's what karma is all about, teaching you to care enough to push yourself in whatever direction you think is going to help make you a better soul. It's not easy. That's why you have reincarnation. It takes many, many, many lifetimes to find the real you, if you will. And there are gods that specialize in things that aren't very caring. Because if you didn't have hate, there would be no definition of love. You have to have opposites. You have to have degrees of variation. That's why we need language. So that we can grade things, that we can differentiate things. We can differentiate souls. So that you can interact with a range of souls that you're comfortable with. That's where we're going eventually with this whole multiverse thing. Not everybody wants to play with everybody else. Everybody has their own preference of the games they like and the games they hate. I hate playing cleaning up games, and it's a game that my family wants me to play every day. It's frustrating. I can't stand to see the same messes made over and over and over again. I can tolerate it from children, but adults, it kind of drives me batty that why don't you pay more attention to what you're doing so you don't have such a big mess to clean up when you're done? That's my pet peeve. I imagine that's probably a pet peeve of God too, and what drove him to the solution he had for creation. Why he invented karma as sort of a nanny AI, trained it, and basically the latest versions of karma are the AIs that govern the multiverse. When you die, your Merkaba is compared against the Merkabas of all the heavens out there, and you're sent to the one that is the best suited to your next training. That's why there are heavens of Christians, many different heavens of Christians, because there are many different sects. Not all Christians believe the same stuff. Not all are as dogmatic as others. Actually, most Christians, if you really got down to asking them, worship other gods, and they just conveniently call themselves Christians. They worship the gods of communism, the gods of capitalism, the gods of Democrat, the gods of Republican, the gods of Russia, the god of China. Any idea that you become dogmatically addicted to the exclusion of seeing anything from another perspective is kind of like a god, right? And that's what creates divisions amongst us. Now, some believe that, we can fix that by let's just make our God one. Everybody is going back to source, and that's where we came from, and we're just divided, and we're just having these mental masturbation experiences in each incarnation because God wants to learn something new from us. This is crazy. This is crazy thinking that, really needs this talk today to dispel. It's illogical. It's nonsensical. It makes a mockery of science. It makes a mockery of God. Let's not do that. That's not the solution. And I think, you're seeing in spades right now that this whole oneness numbness has led to more and more conflict in our species, because everybody has a different definition of one is too, just like they have a different definition of God. And some of the oneness cult worship crystals, and some of them worship the perfect diet, and some of them worship communism, and some of them worship Britney Spears. I don't know. And this cult of oneness is very attractive. It's the perfect spiritual bypassing cult, because its basic tenet is that, it's the source that's real, and I'm just having this imaginary experience so the source can experience more. So I'm really God, but I don't know I'm God right now, and so I can do whatever I want because I'm God. that sound like ape thinking to you? Sounds like it to me. Sounds like beast thinking. Not really ape thinking. I think apes have more lofty thoughts than that, frankly. At any rate, I think I've made my point. If you enjoy this talk, like, share, subscribe. I'm in a little bit of a bind right now, so I wouldn't be adverse to having some support once in a while from somebody who likes what I'm doing here. I'll also put in a little plug. I am ready, able, and willing to do coaching on spiritual matters. If you like what you're hearing but you have questions and you want to have an in-depth discussion on something, hey, come to me. If you want to learn the technique that helped me get to where I am today, which I call active meditation, how to learn to be a responsible creator of things that may not be real without making them so real that you get sucked into your own creation, which is a big problem for actors. There have been some roles that I played where I went so deep into the character that it became part of me. It became a very dark part of me, and was very difficult to get out of and back into my normal life. It ended up affecting relationships, affecting a lot of other things. So I've been through a fair amount to get where I am. I'm speaking from experience, a lot of experience. At any rate, so if you have any interest in that, you can contact me directly. I think my contact information is there. If you want to do it in a more organized setting, I'm on lessons.com and freelance.com. And I hope soon another site, which I won't put a plug in for until they accept my application. That's how I roll. Till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe, and happy karma.